for your time with us today. Today's topic is managing first aid injuries, which has been an important topic as of late, considering the changes that took place January 1st, 2017, which we'll be getting into. As a reminder, all attendees are on mute for this presentation. So if you do have follow-up questions, please reach out to us directly. I believe you have our contact information. We can dive into your specific questions deeper if needed, and happy to do that. Furthermore, following this webinar, the presentation materials, along with some supporting documentation, as always, will be shared with all of you that are attending here today. At this point, I'll hand it off to the experts and our partner when it comes to workforce safety and claims management, Sharon Poston, who's president of ESM Solutions. Thank you, Sharon.
Okay, thank you, Adam. Good morning, everyone. Let me see here if I can get us moving along. We have about 76 people who registered, so this seems to be a topic of interest, as Adam said. My goal is to present an overview in 20 to 25 minutes. So if you have questions, as Adam mentioned, you can either follow up with the Barrowmaster advisor following, or even during the presentation, you can type in your questions. I'm not going to take the time during the presentation to address them, but we will address the answers to everyone afterwards, so you can get the benefit of hearing the questions and the answers that have come along. In the last webinar, we previously reported to you about the changes in the XMOD calculation for 2017. And the Insurance Commissioner's directive said that it clarified that an employer's obligation to report all workers' compensation injuries, including first aid injuries, if seen by a doctor. So this is nothing new. Workers' compensation is legislated and regulated and has specific forms and deadlines. But today we're going to talk about some things that are new. So we'll talk about those first aid reporting requirements, a little bit about what the labor code actually says, and then how Cal OSHA defines first aid. We'll give you some procedures that you may already have that you're using, but we'll give you some sample documents that you can use in managing your own internal procedures for first aid claims that do not need medical care, how you manage those, how you use that first aid log to track your non-reportable injuries, what if an employee declines treatment, what do you do, and then a reporting first aid decision tree. So we'll go through all of that today. So why is there confusion? Well, for as long as I've been in workers' comp, which has been a while, 35 plus years, there's always been an unwritten understanding that employers could pay the clinic directly for first aid claims. I mean, I've always thought it was kind of a strange system that you pay this hefty mandatory workers' comp premium, and then on top of it, you pay your own first aid claims. But that was an unofficial practice. It was generally accepted in order for employers to keep the XMOD and the premiums down. So the basic premise for insurance is to spread the risk. So those who were at greater risk or had claims would pay more through an increase in their XMOD or their premium. So the Bureau and the Insurance Commissioner said that this practice of some employers paying their first aid claims directly and some not created an unfair advantage and an uneven playing field. So what do we do now? Well, here's what the directive is. Any and all claims, including those involving first aid, as defined in the California Labor Code Section 5401A, in which indemnity losses or medical losses are incurred or allocated loss adjustment expenses are paid directly, must be reported individually. So this was a bulletin that came out from the Workers' Compensation Insurance Rating Bureau and signed and approved by the Insurance Commissioner in March of 2017, and applies to all injuries that occur in the policy year 2017, or in the calendar year 2017. So what do we recommend? Well, we recommend that you comply with the regulations, and that all claims in which an individual employee sees a medical provider, is seen by the doctor or the clinic, must be reported to your carrier or your third-party administrator within your 5-day reporting requirement. Now, the directive goes on to say that all medical costs, even those paid by the employer, must also be reported to the carrier. And then the carrier is to report those to the WCIRB. Now, I don't actually know how that's going to happen. It's really not possible that all of the carriers will be able to get all of the numbers from employers, but that's what the directive says. So if, in fact, that is a true statement, then why not just let the carrier or the third-party administrator, I'll use carrier because some of you have a TPA, third-party administrator, but it gets a little convoluted if I keep saying that. So we'll assume that you work with an insurer or a carrier, insurance carrier, that you let them pay the bill because they are going to only pay according to the medical fee schedule. There is one in California, and they will also take the discounts from their network PPO. Now, there are some penalties that can be applied to the employer if they don't comply with this rule, and perhaps penalties to doctors and insurance carriers. And most insurance companies and doctors are not willing to take a risk of having licenses suspended for not reporting. So you've probably already received notice from your insurance company that you are to report all first aid claims in which an employee is seen by a medical provider to them. Now, some medical providers have also started new processes and will not bill the employer directly for first aid injuries. Kaiser on the Job, for example, will not send the bill to the employer. Coventry, I understand, just started this process. I haven't heard of US HealthWorks. You know, these are some of the major players, but they're going to take the decision out of your hands anyway. So the goal is to report the claims promptly, get them paid according to the fee schedules and all the discounts available to you, and then carry on. Okay, let's take a, one more thing. So kind of, you know, all of you that are sitting there in a bit of stupefaction and thinking, oh my gosh, why is this happening? There are some things going on behind the scenes. And one of them is that the Bureau has proposed that the first $250 of every claim be eliminated from the computation of the XMOD. So that potential plan is being reviewed, and it's to be provided to the insurance commissioner by June, which was where we are, and it would be effective 1/1/19. So that $250 threshold would eliminate most of the first aid claims that we're already concerned about. So our angst, our concern about, oh, this is going to impact me in an adverse way, may not even come about because the first $250 will be deducted. Now, the 2017 policy year, which is where we are, will impact the 2019 XMOD policies. So the timing would be fine. Now, why they couldn't have done this all together and made this announcement at the same time, I don't know. But here we are, and now I believe that the Bureau is going to push this through, and the first $250 of every claim will not be included in your XMOD calculation. Well, let's look at the definition of first aid. There is a specific labor code definition of first aid, and I'm just going to read it. First aid is defined as any one-time treatment and any follow-up visit for the purpose of observation of minor scratches, cuts, burns, splinters, or other minor industrial injuries which do not ordinarily require medical care. This one-time treatment and follow-up visit, you notice that's singular visit, for the purpose of observation is considered first aid even though provided by a physician or registered professional personnel. Now those claims, if they are seen by a registered physician, registered professional personnel, are reportable to the carrier or the third-party administrator. Now there's also an OSHA definition of first aid. And so it gets a little confusing right here. So OSHA lists all of these things that are considered non-medical. I'm not going to go through them, but there's the list. And those are not recordable on your OSHA 300 log. So the difference is first aid where you see a medical provider is reportable to your carrier, but it is not recordable on your OSHA log. I know, can this get any more confusing? All right, let's take a look at what the deadlines are. There are deadlines and reporting requirements for the doctor. The doctor must complete a doctor's first report of injury, the DFR, it's also 5021, and submit that to the insurance carrier for every patient that they see on all visits, including first aid. So whether or not you report it to your carrier, the doctor is reporting it to your carrier. Now some carriers, Travelers for example, will go ahead and automatically set up a claim and you'll see it on your loss run. So regardless, it'll either show a 0 if you have previously been paying that number, or now it may show the dollar amount that they pay. Some other carriers, Liberty Mutual, for example, do not set up a claim. They just keep that as a log. So this is kind of in a state of transition, and carriers are trying to figure out exactly what their processes are as well. So the employer responsibility is that you must complete the employer's report of injury or illness, that's Form 5020, submit it to the carrier within 5 days. You have an additional responsibility to provide the employee with the employee claim form, the DWC-1, within 1 working day of knowledge. Now here's the part that's a little confusing. I almost didn't include this, but this is part of the labor code. It's a 5021, or a DWC-1 is not required for first aid claims. Can this get more confusing? But I believe that you should just go ahead and give the claim form. If the employee goes to the doctor, give them the claim form, because it will provide documentation later on if there are other disputes. Okay, now I'm going to change the focus a little bit, because we can be angry or upset or blame the Bureau or blame the insurance commissioner or our legislators, but we really can't control those things that I've just talked about, other than with our votes. So let's take a look internally within our own organization about the things that we can control. So if you are upset about this first aid reporting requirement, why is that? How many first aid claims are you having? And how can you reduce those? There are 3 basic techniques in risk management. The first one is avoidance. Prevent that injury if you can. Focus on the cause of the injury, not the cost. Maybe that's my message to you today. Let's focus on the cause so we don't have first aid claims, and then we eliminate all of our problems. Second, a risk management technique is to mitigate. You reduce the impact by having policies and procedures in place, and we're going to talk about that. And then manage. Report the injuries timely, follow up and talk with your injured worker, bring people back to work in modified or alternative duties. Those are the things that you can do internally to manage your own costs. Now, I have a list of procedures, and I'm just going to go through highlighting them because I'm already at about 12 minutes. So first of all, if a serious injury occurs, you call 911 or you take your injured employee to the medical provider immediately. Make sure your HR and your management people are all trained in what to do when a serious injury occurs. And also train them that no matter how small, injuries must be reported to a supervisor at the time that they occur. And then train your supervisors that they're required to report them to HR. And I'll use HR, Human Resources, as kind of a placeholder, because it could be whoever it is that you've designated. It could be your safety director, so a management person, your workers' comp person, whoever you have in that role. And then the manager of HR completes the accident investigation form, and those accidents and reports are reviewed by the safety committee. And then the HR reports to the carrier within 5 days. So you've got that days 1 through 4 to kind of manage and determine, did the employee go to the doctor or not go to the doctor? Have you completed your accident investigation? And then those near misses or incidents that maybe don't even require medical treatment are going to be topics of conversation at your safety committee. Because if you're having a great number of those, frequency usually will generate severity. So you want to stop the frequency so that one doesn't turn into a more costly claim. Then all minor medical or first aid injuries that don't require a trip to the clinic will be logged on your first aid log. I'll give you a sample of that in a minute. Now this is not a requirement, but this is an internal procedure that you could set up. So what if your employee says, I have a slight cut, but it's not bleeding and it looks like I'm fine. I don't think I need to go to the doctor, but I've been trained that I have to report things, so I'm reporting them. So if they don't want to see a doctor for their injury, then have them complete a declination form. Now, we talked in the past about, our last seminar, in fact, was about post-termination claims, employees that leave and then come back, and then allege that they had an injury while they were employed. So if you have all of this documentation about what body part was injured, yes, there was an incident on January 1st, but it was to his right hand only, and not all these additional body parts that are being named. So it gives you some documentation and support to defend later post-termination claims that we discussed at our last webinar. And then if they don't see the doctor, someone, HR or whoever the designated person is, should follow up in 3 days on all minor injuries and first aid injuries to find out, has the condition improved? Has it gotten worse? Do we need to send them to the clinic at this point? So those are some samples of a procedure that you should have in place and train your staff and train your supervisors and managers to complete. So what if the employee does come in, reports the injury, and goes to the first aid station, wherever that would be, and says, I think I'm fine? Well, the first thing is offer medical clinic evaluation. You know, do you need to see the doctor? Do you want to see the doctor? But honestly, let common sense prevail. Discuss the symptoms, discuss the needs of the employee. I encourage you to have supervisors or managers who have been trained in first aid. And then after you've gone through that process, if you're in doubt or the employee is in doubt, then go ahead and send them to the clinic. This is always a difficult part for employer because they think they should send everything to the doctor to be evaluated. But I encourage you to have people who are trained in evaluating first aid situations and then discuss with the employee what the needs are as well. Here's a sample of an internal document. This is not mandatory, but one that you might implement as mandatory for your company about if an employee declines treatment. The nice thing about this is that it documents exactly what happened. Remember, you're looking at the cause, and your goal is to prevent that injury from happening again. So by filling this out, they're telling you what happened. They're telling you the body part that was injured, left hand, left leg, right leg, so that you have all of that documented. And then they sign at the bottom, and it goes on to say that by signing this, you can still request medical care. We've offered you medical care, you declined it, and it instructs them that if the condition worsens, report to your supervisor and we will complete the necessary paperwork. So it kind of gives them the next step. You obviously cannot sign away your rights to workers' comp. You're not asking them to sign that they were not injured. They're just declining treatment at this time. This is a sample of an injury log that I had just mentioned to you earlier. Again, this is an internal document. It's a sample. You can modify it however you want, and this will be part of the packet that we send you afterwards. But this should be with your first aid kit, and you would keep a log of how many claims have occurred, what happened, what the treatment was, if they went on to see the doctor, and so on. Another advantage of this is that if you're filling up the whole page, then maybe there's something else that you need to look at. If you're having pages and pages of first aid claims, that's not a good thing. There is perhaps an underlying cause that you need to take a look at. But this will help you document and keep track of the injuries that are occurring. Now you can use this in your safety meeting as well. You know, these are the things that have happened. Begin to look for trends. Are things happening on one production line, with one supervisor, in one department? So you can begin to see, where do I need to focus my attention of safety? I've given you the websites for what should be included in a first aid kit. Oh, by the way, that log will also help you keep track of the supplies that are being used and that you know to refill in the safety kit, your first aid kit. Construction has a separate directive for what the first aid kit should look like. Then there's a general industry. Now, the Labor Code's recommendation is that you get your kit together and then you send the list to your doctor, your treating doctors, and ask them to approve. But honestly, you can go on the website, you can order already put together kits that comply. You can get lists of things that you need to put in your first aid kit, and the website that are listed here, the Department of Industrial Relations, DIR, will also give you more information about what should be included in the first aid kit. This is a flow chart that shows all of that stuff that we just talked about. So what if your safety director is out and the supervisor doesn't know what to do? You can actually print this, laminate it, have it with your first aid kit, or have it with your first aid logbook, wherever you're keeping these records, and use that as for the person to follow to see, what do I do next? How do I manage this first aid claim? Here are a couple of more resources for you. I mentioned, your first procedure should always be to call 911 or take the injured employee directly to the hospital if it's a serious injury. And you know that if it is a serious injury that requires hospitalization overnight or permanent damage, that you're required to call OSHA within 8 hours of knowing that it was a serious injury. And by that, sometimes a doctor may keep an employee in the hospital overnight for observation, and if it's just for purposes of observation, that's not necessarily reportable to OSHA. But those definitions and exactly what a serious injury are listed in this website as well. Oh, I forgot. Here is the definition of serious. Again, website's available for you to take a look at. Okay. Whew, that was fast. I hope I answered some of the questions. It is a bit confusing, but the regulations are pretty clear. Employers are required to report first aid claims in which the employee sees a medical provider. First aid injuries that occur on the premises and are taken care of on the premises where no medical treatment is obtained, no professional medical treatment is obtained, do not have to be reported. So that's kind of the differentiation. That's why I think it's important that you have people trained to say, does this person need to see the doctor? Not that you would hesitate in sending them if there's a doubt. Okay, thank you for joining us for this webinar. As Adam said, the slide presentation, the recorded webinar, and all these forms that we just used will be available on the Bowermaster website. And of course, you can always call the Bowermaster advisor if you have any additional questions. I haven't looked to see if there were some questions typed in, but if there are, we will send out the answers to everyone. There are a few other trainings coming up this summer. I really applaud the Bowermaster team for their efforts to educate their clients, employers. Workers' compensation can be very confusing, and so we try to shed a little light on some of the areas that seem to be causing angst amongst the employers. So that was the reason for this first aid webinar. So don't hesitate to call them or to email your advisor at Bowermaster, and we'll get back to you with some answers. So look for July and August, some emails to be sent to you to let you know what's coming up for those months. Once again, we thank you for your participation today. I know it was brief and quick, but we hope we can shed some light on some of the issues that we have been discussing here. Thanks very much for attending. Goodbye.